Alright everybody, before we start the video, please navigate down, hit that subscribe button, make sure you ding that notification bell as well. Also make sure to like the video, and please, if you want to support the channel, head over to my Patreon page and subscribe. Alright everybody, why are we looking at an NS7iii and a Rane One video? Well, I want to talk a bit of the pedigree that the Rane One kind of followed, and the company, and the company that absorbed it all in music. But let's start talking OG. The original NS7, it's just a little bit smaller than this one. It was a 2-channel controller, did have the 7-inch platters, no effects, had your hot cues, but it was pretty basic. But this was revolutionary. There was nothing in the market that had moving platters in a controller form. It was almost, I think it was almost exactly as heavy as the NS7iii. The NS7iii is actually the heaviest of them all. Then it got a next step up. We had a module that you can throw onto the back of it. Matter of fact, there's little hooks on the end of this NS7iii. That was originally what the hooks were for. Then it continued on for either a laptop stand or the screens that you can put on this. The NS7iii came, added a lot of features. This is kind of where I always thought the NS7 II and the 3 just always seemed like it was just trying to be a lot and not quite 100% executing on everything. And then Newmark got bought out by InMusic, and so did Rane, so did Denon. There was this great absorption of all these brands. And I really wondered where this would stand in the lineup. Newmark was definitely getting shifted towards a more economy type brand. And this thing was an absolute tank. This was the real oddball out in its lineup. And I always wondered if they ever replaced this, and this has been end of life for a little while now, a couple years now, but if they replaced this, would it be under the Denon brand or would it be under the Rane brand? This is the history of it. InMusic, took all these brands, kind of reshifted things around, and now we have the Rane One. Now, I gotta say, I am so impressed by Rane even coming out with a controller. I did not think this was actually ever going to be a thing. Again, I thought Denon would be the natural successor to something like this, but the more I think about it, this really is just this kind of perfect fit of, at least for me, as somebody who loves the moving platters, somebody who, as a wedding DJ, wants that portability, wants something that's not super heavy. And the NS7iii is definitely, it's chunky. Just don't mince words. It's a beast. But this really just combines all these things that I truly wanted as a DJ, and we're gonna get into a lot of depth with it. But thank you, Rane. Thank you for producing something that I have not felt this much excitement about something as soon as I learned about it. Let's compare not only the Rane One over to the NS7iii, but my reference setup. So, let's see, the good, the bad, the ugly, where does all the chips fall in this? Now, before we jump into this, I want to give a big shout out to Ben Stowe and NLFX. Because of him, I was able to get this as quick as I did. So thanks so much, Ben. Truly appreciate it. All right, everybody, welcome to the top-down version of the Rane One. Now, I am going to swap in the NS7iii, and if I'm trying to do a reference between what this offers compared to some others, but very simple, very straightforward. I wish I could test this also in Virtual DJ, but unfortunately, they just don't have a release for this yet. It should come out pretty soon. And starting off very simple, you have your scroll and load. Please take note, this is not a mirrored layout. If you're a controller person, you are used to the mirrored layout. If you are a turntablist or whatnot, you are used to more this layout. And I definitely appreciate the this type of layout versus the mirrored. I can get used to both, don't get me wrong. But there is just something about this layout that's a little bit more familiar. Press to load, all your expected stuff. I just want to take a note on this start-stop button. It just feels so amazing. I would say even slightly better than my Rane 12s. Those, don't get me wrong, feels excellent. This just has just a slight more click to it, and I really like that. It's definitely very reminiscent of what I've used over the years, but very, very good. By far, I love the feel of this. Going back up, of course, you can back out of your listings. You can load prep by holding shift and the load prep button. You can scrub along your songs. We'll just, very simple, straightforward. This is actually a pretty good size. You know, it fits in my finger quite well. I can go where I need to go. Just works really good. Now you can adjust your stop time on your decks. One thing the NS7iii has that this does not, that I never really use. I always set it to one setting and that was it. And that is your start time. But again, I personally don't need it, but everything is really good with that. You've got 2 marker points. People who are used to more needle location to scratch from, and people who are used to the 12 o'clock position to scratch from. Again, nice and simple. You can slip, so you engage slip. Simple, straightforward. You can also turn your motor off. So I definitely had at least 2 people reach out to me asking if you can turn the motor off on this. People worried about wear and tear on the motor. But very simple, very straightforward. You can censor, and you can also reverse. Now, coming below, one thing I will note on this actually does feel pretty good. It definitely has a great centering point on this, but you know, compared to say like your mag fader and all that, this just has just a slightly different feel, a texture to it. Not a real complaint. I'm really picking at the extremes here, but you know, if anything, if I were to design this, the one change I would make this is just a hair deeper and actually putting the faders up in a battle style mode. But again, this is just my particular preference. The spacing in here is more than enough. I don't think I would ever confuse, you know, sliding my pitch and then somehow accidentally sliding my channel fader, but just something to know. Over here, of course, you can change the range of how far you want to go. You can also pitch bend as you would like through buttons. Coming over to the left a little, you do have parameters that you can change, and this is pretty standard through pretty much all controllers and mixers. Nice loop area dedicated, very reminiscent of everything from the Rane 70s, Rane 72s, the Pioneer S9, the S7, the S11, so on and so forth. Having this dedicated area is very nice. Although, if I ever had one beef about this, and I think I'm probably the only person in the universe that would complain about this, is you have to hold shift to do your manual loop in and loop outs. Now for me, because I spin a lot of you know, older funk and soul that's not syncopated, you know, it's nice if I just didn't have to do the extra function behind it, but it's something I can definitely live with, and having a totally dedicated loop area while your effects are engaged is a very nice touch. Now over to the performance pads. Very, very, very reminiscent of what you would see in your Rane 70s and Rane 72s. Has a more spongy button. Again, if I was to have any complaint, and this would go with the 70s, 72 as well, I think I like the clicky style better. I'm used to the Rane 62. So if I were to change anything. But again, these are such minor nitpicks. It's really good feel on this. It's very simple to engage. This does have sub layers, like in Serato. If you double click your hot cue and if you have pitch play enabled, you'd have to have pitch and time on this. You would get your second layer, but not every function has a sub function. Now, I can only guess in Virtual DJ, all those could be mapped, both the main and your subs, but just something I haven't been able to test with. And to the left, again, here's your shift button, which I've used a few times. There is, of course, a dedicated Q button. Some people have complained because some controllers do have a much larger Q button to use. I personally don't really use the Q button that much, so this does not really bother me. You can turn sync on and off as you would like, and of course, again, that plunger feel, it just feels amazing. If we go over here to the right, you have your line switching between RCA inputs. So yes, you can hook turntables into this. You will need a DVS pack from Serato if you choose that route. There's also B, because yes, there are 2 sound cards in this. Something you don't see in a ton of controllers. Yes, flagships, and this is definitely a flagship, so they come correct on that. Top down, of course, you have your main levels for both your decks, and you have total kills on your highs, your mids, and your lows. And you do have a low pass and a high pass. Again, just feels really good using it. Very, again, logical. Nice that they have a slight color variation on this, so you can see the difference. Very typical Rane. Coming up here, you have both a main out and your booth out. These are both XLR outs, which is a nice touch on this. Now, if there is one major complaint, if you want to call it a major complaint on this, is the loudness of the sound card. Now, I want to throw in here in the video where I was comparing my NS7iii, which is a very, very, very hot mixer, and the Reloop Elite. This maxing out, notice it didn't redline. And when comparing this to the other mixers, I actually had to increase this significantly. I think it was plus 18 dB on the screen to get to where I felt it was needed. Now, personally, this is not an issue for me at all because I use a digital mixer in between my Soundcraft UI 24 and back in the days my 16. But for those who go directly into speakers in this, those who are constantly, pushing that to the extremes, and there are definitely a lot of DJs out there that redline all the time. I personally actually like this, where I just really can't overpede on my mains and my booths. And the main and booths do have very similar sound profiles, so you'll get the same type of output on it. But for those really, really pushing hot, which I never recommend anyways, that somebody would push that hot, I would note that you might have a complaint about this. Again, I personally don't have a complaint, but it is something to note. So to give this a proper test, I wanted to put this through my Soundcraft UI 24 and do a visual spectrum analyzer of the signal coming in. Now, this signal is totally flat, no compression, nothing's coloring it at all. So this is straight from the XLRs from my Rane One, my NS7iii, and my Reloop Elite. Now, I'm not going to put the audio in this video because of copyright. I am going to upload it as a separate file, and I hope that all the songs can remain. If it gets dinged and it's not monetized, no big deal. But after looking at all 3 devices, they all matched pretty closely on the spectrum. One thing I wanted to note is the NS7iii is noisy. It is super, super noisy. Comparing even the Rane One maxed out on its volume and the Elite maxed out on its volume, there was no noise detected by the Soundcraft. Not until I went way, way into the stratosphere on the input. The NS7iii, however, was very noisy out of the gate. It just was very visually noticeable, and if you put some headphones on, you can definitely hear it. But that's just something I wanted to kind of lay out on this, that pound for pound, the Rane One was very clear. And even on the microphones were actually surprisingly very, very good on the Rane One. All right, everybody, check 1 2 1 2. This is a Sennheiser E835 microphone, wired, plugged into the mic 1 input of the Rane One. I do have the volume maxed out, and I want to say I'm a good, about 4 inches or so from the microphone. So there's definitely a lot of headroom to overimpede and all that. But just wanted to show that this is a relatively quiet mic, but I think that it's doing a good job of capturing the input of this, especially with having some distance away from it. Well, here is the mic input of the NS7iii. It is super, super, super quiet. Always has been. And you definitely need some type of preamp coming into this with typical mics. But this is what it sounds like. Again, the Sennheiser E835 corded mic into the Mic 1 input of the NS7iii. All right, everybody, this happens to be my Sennheiser E835 corded mic into my mic input on the Reloop Elite. So I am getting some bars on it, but it's definitely quieter than some others. But hey, you know, it definitely has some gain going on in it. You can, of course, EQ and bring this up a little bit more, but I wanted to give it flat and give people kind of a more broader experience of what the inputs are by default. Now, coming down a little bit more below, of course, you have your effects. Get to a good point here. And of course, you can stack your effects up to 3 individuals, or you hold and you can stack 2 at a time, or 3. And just like the your typical the S9, the 70, the 72, the S7, the S11, you have awesome toggles. Now, a couple people had questions about this. Are these effects post fader? Well, you can do both at the channel or the crossfader. Somebody said that they had seen something where it didn't look like it was, but you can definitely, you know, it is post. In true 62 form, I always loved this type of cue setup. I was never the super fan, and it's traditional now. You saw this way back in the days, and even things like the 57 and all that of your slider for your cue control. I've always liked this instead, and it's a nice welcome back for at least me, very reminiscent of the 62. If there is my personal major complaint on this would be the feel of the channel faders. They're a little stiff, and I can probably lube them up a little just to get a little bit more action on them. And these aren't the mag style. Now, the mag fader is just, it's butter. I don't know which one would be my favorite, the Innofader, this. They all feel just amazing, and this just feels so, so, so good. But the channel faders, they're just a little stiff. They, you know, I know that they're trying to cut costs by not having mag faders at all spots, but the fact that you can actually swap this out would have been nice to have at least Innofaders on this, if not the mags as well. But again, real nitpicks, but I do use my channel faders quite a bit. So this might be, if there's any sticking point for me, is this, but this is no wall or anything that I'm hitting. You know, this is just, again, just feels amazing. But that is pretty much the main layout on this. You know, you got your 7.2-inch platters on this, and they just feel great. Kept those on there. You know, those who are used to the latest gen Rane 12s, you have a click release, which is actually nice as well. All the others, like my 12s, and also the NS7iiis, the NS7iis, the NS7s, they use a little Allen wrench to tighten up, and they stick on there. So this is definitely a nice feel for it all. All right, everybody, flipping to the front, we have headphone outputs here, 1/4 inch plus an 1/8 inch or 3.5 millimeter. We do have our Q level and Q mix here, where you can do your split on and off. Again, these switches are kind of reminiscent of what you saw on the 62. We do have our crossfader contour. Again, you can do reverse over here, and we have our deck contours here as well. We do have 2 mic mixes here with 2 EQs. Your one is dedicated to mic 1. The other has a split between the mic and the aux. And again, the mic sounded quite decent. And again, I'm not a controller mic person, but these definitely sounded really good. All right, starting to the rear here, we do have our power switch here. Pretty typical, decent. I do wish we had kind of like one of those more chunky, you know, what you would see like in the Rane 62 or whatnot. But again, I'm really nitpicking here. We do have an IEC 320 in here, so no power bricks or anything like that. We do see a fan over here. Have not heard the fan turn on yet. We do have our torque for our platters to low and high. I always set mine on high. I did it also on the NS7iii. Again, we have a sound card with two USB-B types. We have our booth out and main outs, XLRs, once again, really, really solid, but quiet. Solid, but quiet. Our master, we do have an RCA out as well. We do have two inputs, RCA style, which we can toggle between line and phono, also with a ground plug as well. We do have our aux in at RCA style as well. And again, our two mic combo inputs. All right, now comparing the NS7iii, as you can tell, this is definitely a larger unit, a little bit on the width, but significantly on the depth. And we're talking nearly 10 pounds of difference between that. So having this in a case, lugging it around, especially those cases that simply don't have a long side handle on it, this becomes a real exercise to move. It's still portable, but it is on the edge of why am I doing this? But you know, things still feel good on this. You know, I said I've used this for years. This has been kind of my reference, you know, machine to take out probably 80-90% of the time. But you know, there are some things that I did not like about this. First, again, the whole mostly red color scheme really is just, you know, it is what it is. It was definitely not my favorite. You know, you do your track selections. This is a little different because everything's centered on it. Again, I got kind of used to this, but it's just more kind of a feel of, oh, hey, I got to load here, or I got to load here. The start stop on this, or the play, definitely nowhere near as good feeling as the one. It's responsive, don't get me wrong. It's good size, don't get me wrong, but just doesn't have that tactile click, and it just feels so good. So, you know, definite bonus for the Rane One on that. The Akai pads are just slightly bigger on this. I was never a big a pad play kind of person, but you know, I don't think there's any negatives from using the one. As a matter of fact, there's a clicky feel, even though they do have that kind of spongy style on it. This one, again, if you're used to Akai, this is definitely what you're used to overall. But I don't think there's a negative or positive on either. If anything, I do like the one where the whole pad lights up as opposed to just the edges on this. But again, that's a preference thing. Always felt that the hot cue area was really redundant on this. Having a dedicated loop would have been much nicer, but that's just something you just never really saw back in the days on this. Again, what else? Oh yeah, effects here. You know, this was fine. I definitely prefer having effects near the center mass of the controller. But you know, again, I got kind of used to this. But again, in Serato, notice that it only shows and indicates just by one LED. One thing I do like in Virtual DJ using this is they actually lit up the whole area. Always wish there was like a customization level that you could do in Serato on that, but it just simply doesn't exist. You can stack like you could, but you have to individually control each one, so that's a little bit of a pain to use. But you can do individual curves if you want to have, you know, different levels of effects per layer. The touch area is larger on the one and definitely much larger on the 12s. But it's just, you know, again, I don't use it a whole lot, but just something to kind of be aware of. The sensor over here is a toggle switch. It was always, you know, it works. It just always felt like an odd layout overall, but again, something you get used to. Again, as I mentioned before, start time and stop time are available on this, where you only have the stop time on the one. You know, on your decks, these just, it has a slightly different feel, and it's kind of hard to describe. I really think the one nailed it right with the feel of the platters. And when I had my Denon SC3900s, I thought that actually felt really, really good. I just wish it didn't have the sticker drift that it had. But on this, it just had a slight compromise to it. Again, it doesn't feel bad. Don't get me wrong. I always felt that this was as close as you get to vinyl in a controller. That has definitely been surpassed now by the Rane One for absolute certain. Additional things, again, I always thought the capacitive knobs were just, I can't see doing stuff like this, and it's just gimmicky to me. And again, I don't use the screen at all for me. I know some people do, but just was never anything really useful. But there's one absolutely significant difference between the NS7iii and the One is the output on this. This is one hot mixer. When I was initially trying to baseline how I was going to do my spectrum analyzation between all my units, I tried to go 50% on my masters on all three, my elite, my One, and this. I did the same thing for my channel gains, and this was just so loud, so overimpeded. I actually had to cut it way back to about that location, and this is just one hot output. Now, some people like that. Some people want to redline, or in this case, white line their outputs. I always wondered why they just used white for that. That was just a weird. It should have been inversed, white, red. But again, I digress. But this is one hot output. And to top that all off, it is a very noisy mixer. Compared to the One, while yes, the output is nowhere near as loud, I checked to see if I could find any noise on that. I couldn't. And same thing with my Reloop Elite, was a very, very quiet mixer. But definitely the things that kind of set apart the One from the NS7iii, this thing is definitely much larger, much heavier, and loud, but not in a good way. So some final thoughts on the Rane One. I am beyond impressed. They took all the negatives that I really had about the NS7iii, improved on them in so many ways, and this is what we have now. A controller that is smaller, lighter, somehow has bigger platters than what the NS7iii had. Combine the essential core elements of a Rane 70 or Rane 72, especially this Buttersoft fader, and this thing, again, this is my reference now. My NS7iii will be my backup. I plan to actually order a second one of these just to have actually in the studio. I could honestly see this as a replacement for my 12s and my mixer. And before people go, what are you doing, Lou? The 12s were, served a purpose for me, especially, back now 2 years ago, where I dislocated my shoulder, and I needed separates because I couldn't lift the Rane and the case up high enough with the way my shoulder was. So having the separates allowed me more leverage. And I love the 12s. The 12s are just outstanding. But as you see, of course, I have my record collection and all, and more records over here. I need more of having my turntable and my regular mixer set up for that. And for MIDI style mixing, this really serves a purpose. I mean, I can do those one bar scratch routines that it was always found difficult with a larger setup. And it just never really dawned onto me. It was just really the space in between. I never owned a super narrow mixer before, even back, way back when in the days, it was always a bit bigger. And I could just never master it. I definitely have a lot more ease doing it. So just that alone, I was like, oh my God, I can do this routine I have not been able to do in 25, 30 years. So in short, this really hits all the marks. There is very little negative to talk about. The biggest complaints that I know people will have, and I personally don't have this problem. One would be, the gain on the master and the booth outs. They are low. I do have my digital mixer in line. So it doesn't affect me because I can always just boost it out. It's still very, very quiet. I heard no noise. As we saw earlier on my NS7iii, that's a very noisy mixer, especially compared to the Elite in this. Now the Elite is probably quieter overall than this. If I really, really somehow were able to max out the gain on this to equal that of the Reloop and then gain that even further, this would probably have some noise in it. I'm still curious if sound card wise, if this is using the same sound cards as the 70 or 72. It's a good possibility. I'm just curious why it's a little bit quieter than that. And maybe, and I know a lot of DJs do this, even the pros like Jeff and all that, they redline all the time. This kind of keeps you away from that a little bit. You know, you would have to adjust your pots on your decks to really max that out. But for those who are constantly pushing a hot signal to their speakers, they would definitely complain about this. You know, some people will complain about the lack of 4 channels. Not me. This is, I've never used 4 channels except for some just oddball, wonky fun, not something I need. 2 channels is utilitarian. It gets the job done. It's what I definitely want. You know, the toggle style effects is just ridiculously awesome. Some of the other things people might complain about, they'll think this is too heavy. Again, this is a featherweight compared to the NS7iii. You know, many, many pounds, just under 10 pounds lighter and smaller, definitely smaller in the depth and a little bit smaller on the width. And, you know, for me, carrying this around, especially if I put this in your typical, you know, flight case, it'll be manageable. In my NS7iii and my current lightest case that you can find on this, it's the Gator Tour case, I'm still running about 75 pounds. And it wouldn't be so bad if it had a long handle on the side, but unfortunately it does not. So I have to carry it by the corners, and man, is it, you know, the span and the weight just sucks. At least the case manufacturers, they're not released yet, but all the designs I'm seeing has a long side handle for it, so definitely perfect. I don't know if I'm going to run a case on this like that. I might actually build my own. That's like the one gotcha in all this for me personally, is how am I going to transport and use this at an event? Because I've had some ideas about the more furniture style layout and whatnot, and to top that off, because of the width on this, since it's smaller, it won't fit my 33-inch folding table from Odyssey. Now I can get, I think it's a 27-inch or something like that, but then I have to fit my cases underneath it, and I don't think it would work quite as well as I would like. So I still have some experimentation on how I'm going to transport this, but I love to have a concern like this. This thing absolutely rocks. If you are a turntablist by any stretch of the imagination and want something portable, and always felt like the NS7iii was kind of a toy, and it wasn't perfect, but this is your beast to work with. It just feels absolutely, just logically everything there. It feels totally Rane. I know some people were complaining when they saw the photos, oh, it looks, you know, this looks like a toy. This is far from a toy. Is it a 50-pound mixer and 2 decks? No, you know, it's not like that, but this feels so rugged. You know, it's all metal construction. It just feels phenomenal. Now, if you're an NS7 2 or 3 owner and are considering the upgrade, absolutely. Between anybody using the mic input, I personally don't use it, but the mic is just phenomenal. It's not noisy like the NS7iii. The size, the heft of it is lower. You have a bigger surface to scratch on. It feels just like you're working with miniaturized 12s and a 70 deck, you know, minus internal effects. And that's something you would never get in the NS7iii or 2 anyways. This is an absolute no-brainer upgrade for those doing the NS7iiis. If you're a turntablist and you want portability for at least some of your sets, again, this is a no-brainer, especially at the price point. This is a mixer. That's, you know, the price point is a mixer. If you're a 4-channel person, if you don't do a lot of juggling with your platters, if you like really, really, really lightweight, more narrow, you know, this does stand a bit, you know, wide for what it is. You know, a 4-channel mixer with smaller jogs would be, you know, about the same size. You know, if you're one of those people that just doesn't have the craving to touch, you know, a moving platter, that's fine. This isn't the mixer for you. You know, if you need something super, super loud coming out of this, like the NS7iii is ridiculously loud, louder than my Elite, but it's noisy. So if you want loudness, stick with something like that. But if you want something that just has a really, really clear sound to it, if you want something with tons of you know, I/O, you have your two, you know, USBs to hook up 2 different laptops to this. You have you know, just this great feel. You know, this is reminiscent of your, you know, 62s and whatnot. You know, this is of course reminiscent of a 70 or 72. The plunger just feels good, and everything just feels really, really good, really, really solid, you know, about this controller. So in the end, this is an absolute must for anybody looking to upgrade from the NS7 II, NS7 III, turntablists looking for portability, or anybody looking towards this side of the market. Well, there's a video. I really hope you liked it. And if so, make sure you hit subscribe below and hit that thumbs up to help the algorithm. Head over to my Patreon page and subscribe. If you like to see reviews like this, you know, let me know. I usually only review equipment that I personally have a stake in. This one is mine. But naturally, if you have any, I can always see if I can find units to review. But again, I hope you enjoyed this. Stay safe, everybody, and stay tuned.